Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Bloomquist, the Director of Marketing and Communications at mHUB. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're so excited to have you here and share this conversation between our moderator, Michon Ellis, and our disruptor, Alex Frommeyer. They're both fellow entrepreneurs that will be discussing how Beam Dental is disrupting the dental insurance industry. But first, for anyone unfamiliar with the mHUB organization, I just wanted to provide a quick take on what we do here. mHUB is an innovation center for physical product development and manufacturing. Since its founding in 2017, the mHUB startup community has launched more than 1,200 products, created over 2,100 jobs, and raised nearly $1 billion in capital. So I welcome you to visit mhubchicago.com to learn more about how the organization is impacting hard tech and manufacturing innovation on a global scale, by supporting startups and through partnerships with industry. Now for introductions. Moderating this evening's conversation is Michon Ellis. He is the founder and CEO of Clout LLC, which is a public relations and corporate reputation firm. He's a 25-year marketing and communications veteran and a serial entrepreneur. So we're so happy to have you today to lead this conversation.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having me. Excited.
And also joining us is our disruptor this evening, Alex Frommeyer, who is also known to many as Fro. He's the co-founder and CEO of Beam Dental. Fro founded Beam Dental in 2013 with fellow engineers who saw an opportunity to modernize the dental insurance industry through technology. What resulted is a digitally native dental benefits provider that incorporates dental hygiene behavior into policy pricing. Beam has raised over $160 million in venture capital funding and is the only digital-first company within the $75 billion dental insurance policy industry. Beam is available in 41 states around the US and is accepted at over 400,000 access points nationwide. So Alex, Fro, so nice to have you this evening.
Thanks for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, so Michon, I'm gonna kick it off to you to start things off, and I'll join at the end of the Q&A session to wrap things up.
Okay,
Take it away.
Thank you so much. Fro, how are you, man? How are you doing?
Michon, great to be with you, man.
Yeah,
doing great.
Yeah. So let's. There's a lot that I want to cover with you tonight, and we want to make sure that our audience gets to hear you talk about your experience and what's happening, and I'm sure you're going to drop some pearls of wisdom that they'll walk away with this evening. So I'm excited to talk to you. So let's start. So tell me about your background and what led to the idea of Beam Dental.
Yeah, so my background, considering how many times you've already heard the word dental just around the introduction, has nothing to do actually at all with the dental industry. My two co-founders and I, between the three of us, none of us are from the insurance world, from dentistry, from group benefits. We're just engineers. We actually met in engineering school. We met as freshmen in our program in Louisville, Kentucky, and just had a bunch of classes together. So we started as homework buddies. We had a bunch of classes where I was, let's just say, heavily depending on them to get through the class. Mm-hmm. And that was the nature of the relationship for years. But we were also interested in, I think, escaping what we viewed to be our otherwise destiny. You know, all of our friends, and we went on these internship programs as undergrad. You know, all the momentum was to get a job for a large manufacturing plant or a chemical company or an oil refinery when you graduated, and they were well-paying, very good jobs at brand name companies. Mm-hmm. And you know, we did internships at some of these, you know, large established businesses, and you know, our parents are all proud of us and such. And I think our takeaway was, is this really what it is? I mean, is this really what it means to be an engineer for a 50,000 person company? And that version of the field that we had chosen was pretty uninspiring from our perspective. And so we chose a different path. We built our own business instead and did it out of my living room. Yeah, which is super fun. And now, you know, at the time it was maybe a little bit less fun because you didn't know what was going to happen in the future. Now I wish I could go back to those days every day. And so we started a consultancy, a services business, and spent a couple years profitably running a company out of that living room while wrapping up our undergrad engineering program. And then that morphed into Beam Dental over time. My sister was in dental school right at that same time period. She ends up, of course, becoming a dentist. She married a dentist. All four of his brothers, my brother-in-law, all four of his brothers are dentists.
Wow.
And so we had all these forces coming together at the time that just opened our eyes to the opportunity that sits at the intersection of technology and dentistry. And that became the Beam name. And it also became what we focused on, which was this huge industry, 75, 80 billion dollars in dental insurance alone, where it's fundamentally, non-digital. It's a very analog industry, lots of fax machines, lots of phone calls and emailing back and forth. And then I think the other thing that really got us excited about starting Beam was learning that 100 million Americans don't have dental coverage. And so Beam has always stood for health equity, and then using technology to make a more beautiful, more automated, and a more user-friendly, experience-driven version of dental insurance.
Wow, that's fantastic. So tell me what's happening with the company now. Talk about some of the milestones that got you to where you are today.
Well, from those humble beginnings in the living room.
From those humble beginnings.
I'm proud to.
Those are the best memories, by the way, and you touched on it.
Yeah, I am proud to report that we have moved on from my living room. That's number one. And
Right.
and spaces like mHUB, which I've been to a bunch of times, didn't exist back when we were getting started. So there wasn't even an option like that, or else that probably would have been the type of thing we would have wanted to do. We ended up raising a round of venture capital in 2014. Company today is based in Columbus, Ohio. We'll touch 300 employees by the end of this year. We're at maybe 275 right now.
Awesome.
And we've raised over $160 million of venture capital across a multitude of rounds. So these days we have a lot of people helping us, a lot of capital on the balance sheet. And the company has morphed from an IoT hardware centric business, which is where we started, and we can dive in deep on that. And we've morphed into one of the first and a leading insurtech company or insurance technology company. And we think the business will go public in the next 3 years, because what we represent to insurance technology, to the employee benefits space, and to some of these as yet tech-enabled markets is really a whole new dynamic, a whole new paradigm for how this industry is going to operate in the future.
Sure. And so you touched on it a little bit. So let's talk about this. So the dental insurance sector, that's so sexy. Yeah. So
says everyone.
Right. So talk about how do you innovate something like that that's so traditional in nature? And you touched on it a little bit. And you're right, you guys were one of the first IoT, solutions to that industry. So talk about what that was like.
Well, when we started the company, it was 2012. And one of the most exciting things happening at the time was the passage of and then the rollout of the Affordable Care Act. We're a couple years removed of the passage of the Affordable Care Act by 2012, but it was still just getting going, and had these big promises attached in terms of the forthcoming digitization of healthcare in a broad sense. And at the same time, there were some really exciting companies getting off the ground that were using data for health applications. I think the most notable of which, and the one that we were really inspired by in particular, was Fitbit. And they really invented the idea of a wearable, and what we now think of as smart watches and an interface that's on your wrist. And they were very health focused or fitness focused. And so we thought that there was something really exciting about the intersection of IoT, sensors were getting cheaper, computing power was going up, artificial intelligence was starting to take off, and then this huge market of healthcare, this huge market of insurance. There's something in that cauldron. You put all those ingredients together. We thought that was pretty exciting space. So our first business and business model at Beam was to build IoT infrastructure for existing insurance companies. Our logic was pretty simple, we thought, which was preventative care, brushing and flossing your teeth, especially brushing your teeth, is a super common behavior of
Sure.
people, regardless of age and gender and all these things. Like everybody in the world brushes their teeth, and yet dental insurance companies have no idea who's doing it and when, and then how that is playing out in terms of preventative care leading to dental health outcomes. So by connecting the toothbrush and therefore collecting that data, we could help dental insurance businesses better understand their own members or their prospective members, and therefore price them more competitively into the market. And so we built the first connected toothbrush back in 2012. And I should actually pull up pictures and send them to you. These things looked terrible. They were they were poorly designed. This is, I think, one of our big lessons as hardware entrepreneurs at the time was like, you go back to that MVP product should be an MVP. We should be embarrassed by what we put in the market. And we were like, man, we had just enough money to afford some molds and shoot some plastic and get a product on the market. We did the electronics ourselves. We actually did a lot of the initial prototyping in my bathtub.
Okay.
and so, I mean, this is a really, really scrappy process early on. But we loved it, and we loved the having to get creative to get a solution out onto the market, so we could prove that toothbrushes should be connected, that data was valuable to a customer, and we got product to market. It turns out that we moved over 10,000 connected toothbrush units in about 18 months.
Wow.
Which was amazing, and it was through a mix of deals we struck with some dental insurance businesses who were piloting the program. Some Kickstarter stuff we were doing or crowdfunding, and then just good old-fashioned e-commerce. And I think what we learned as we got this product out in the world was all of the pluses and all of the minuses that you can only learn by having something out there where there's real users paying real money and really experiencing the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that became then the basis for what we morphed into the insurance business later.
That's awesome. And there's an important piece that you touched on, and I would say to the entrepreneurs in the audience, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's better to get something out and get going and learn something from that versus spending years trying to perfect it. So that's a big piece of it. So let's talk about what's impacting the business. COVID has really disrupted supply chain. How are you guys dealing with those types of things, or are you dealing with those types of things?
We totally are. It's we were talking about this a bit recently, that on one hand, Beam is multiples and multiples the size that we were when we were first buying and building a supply chain and buying components. So on one hand, we're like, man, we're such a big buyer of these things versus just a few years ago. On the other hand, in the grand scheme of manufacturers, we are still super tiny.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, supply chain constraints have hit us just like the vast majority of manufacturers out there, because product is going to the very biggest high volume manufacturers, and even they are struggling to a degree as well. So we have absolutely been affected by this year's very wonky marketplace for critical components and semiconductors and the whole deal. And we actually have a whole new generation of our connected toothbrushes coming out in the first quarter next year, and that's been delayed from what I thought was going to be a September or October launch, just here coming up in a few weeks, because of these very shortages. So we're already pushing timelines inside the walls.
Boy, that'd been great for the holiday season too. That's a tough one. Wow. So what does the company look like? So your crystal ball, what does it look like in 5 years, and where do you see your company?
Well, on one hand, I think one of the most fun answers is I don't know, and that's kind of why I love it so much, is because so much is going to happen, and the company's only existed for about 8 years, so 5 more years from now is close to longer than the company's even existed to date,
Point.
which makes it really fun, right? It makes it really fun to actually not know what happens next. But here are a couple things that I think will happen next. The first is that we do employee benefits products today. Dental insurance is what makes us different and special in this market. But we also provide a handful of other popular employee benefits products like vision insurance, life, disability coverage, things small, medium-sized employers need to attract and retain employees and take great care of them as well. And so we're going to continue to add more products to our menu with a focus on that small business and its needs. And those could be a mix of well-established existing employee benefits products, or even some emerging new ones that we're going to test and experiment with. So I think that'll be a really fun part of the business. Another component that I'm really excited about, which is more hardware centric, back to that original DNA of our company, is once we get this new generation of hardware out on the market early next year, we're really excited to build out a more robust version of rewards. And so what I mean by rewards inside our business is that we have like an internal currency, which we just think of as Beam points.
Sure.
Every day when you brush your teeth, you're accruing some points into your piggy bank, which you can see inside our mobile experience. And then those points add up over time. And as you go to the dentist and get checkups and stuff, that also gives you points. So there's a variety of ways to actually get points. But brushing your teeth every day is one of those ways that points are accrued. And as that gamified experience yields more points, you can redeem them for other Beam products, like replacement heads for the brush, for example. A variety of different toothpaste options, dental goods, dental preventative care goods. But we've also started adding gift cards recently, which I'm really excited about, which is essentially, in a way, we're paying you to brush your teeth, right? You brush, the points get redeemed for an Amazon gift card or a Visa gift card or Walmart. And then you can, buy the things you want to buy. And we think there's something really exciting about this positive feedback loop that comes in once this tool, this thing that you're using every day, right? Like we're all picking up somebody's toothbrush to brush your teeth every day. Not only is it cleaning your teeth and helping achieve a health outcome for you, but when you use a Beam brush, you're actually also saving money up toward, something that you want to buy. And we think that's a really compelling way to think about the future of health and wellness, gamification in the context of healthcare. Absolutely. In a way that's very resonant because it's such a common behavior. And so we're really excited about that over the next 12 months in particular.
That's awesome. I tell you what, the gamification, that would totally work with my 8-year-old if it would, somehow connected to a video game. He'd be all
work, right?
Be able to buy it for sure. So no, that's good stuff. Very exciting stuff. So we have a huge audience, and I wanted to reserve some time with you to just talk about some advice for the founders that are on the call. And as you know, mHUB is a community of hard tech entrepreneurs, and many of them are in that prototyping phase. And you talked about your Beam brush. So talk about that experience. Talk about what you went through. Talk about, the different versions you went through, and how you, source your materials and test it. Just talk about that experience.
Yeah. Well, so we, even the Beam brush itself wasn't the first thing my co-founders and I built together that was a hardware product or an IoT product. In our first business together, we were doing just consulting services using our backgrounds. And I'm a structural engineer, one's a mechanical engineer, the other's a electrical engineer. So we ended up doing a lot of stuff in the IoT and custom electronics space. And so I would say, experimented back in those days pretty wildly with a variety of different models. Sub-assemblies overseas coming together for final assembly domestically. That's actually how the Beam brush is organized today. Sometimes we would do completely overseas builds and then just ship a finished product already packaged over to us. Sometimes we would do finished products getting shipped from overseas, and then we would do final QA, packaging and logistics domestically. We built our own custom test rigs as well. So we were often, taking, for example, building out a PCB board and then building our own testing rig to confirm that the electronics were alive and doing what they are supposed to do before they went out into the world. There were a variety of different experiments we ran back then, but I would say a couple principles really stuck with us, and we've used it to scale Beam to this degree today. One is we love control. And control just means, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, your business is going to evolve so much more quickly than any partner you could ever hire to help you execute the work. Now, unless somebody on the call today happens to have happens to own a large factory, you're going to depend on partners no matter what. And so finding partners that are used to working with startups and folks just getting off the ground, I think is important, because they're going to be the closest to leaning in with you and helping design and develop products with you, and do it in a way that preserves the flexibility that no matter what you're going to need as an entrepreneur. We made a lot of decisions trading cost for control early on. We paid a lot more on a per unit basis to be able to do more of our sub-assemblies domestically, for example, where we could go to the factories, make adjustments, work with the partner.
Sure.
And, with the same time zone, no language barrier, that type of stuff, we think matters in as much as you learn and see new opportunities or see problems arise, which are inevitable, you can actually get in there and make those trades. And we were willing to pay more on like a per unit basis to be able to figure those things out in those earliest days. My view here is because you can always optimize later, right? And optimization's going, eventually it'll be, whatever you're building will become this highly cost engineered, this like no wasted materials version of itself. But that doesn't need to happen for the first unit. It probably doesn't need to happen for the first 10 or 100 or 1,000 or maybe even 10,000. It might not be till you're really going for huge scale, depending on the product, of course, before you really care deeply about cost engineering. And a lot of the other entrepreneurs that we spent time with at the time were really obsessed with pre-optimization because they were engineers, and that's what we do, right? We like zoom in on the thing and we try to make it the best version it can be. And they were so obsessed with that, they ended up not being able to adapt when their product needed to change to find product market fit. And that's a lesson that's really stuck with us. And we frankly use that in both hardware development and in software development still today. It's very iterative, preserving flexibility, and that allows us to build better products over time with speed.
Yeah, and that's great advice about, controlling it in the early stages, even if you have to pay a little bit more. That's really smart. So you talk about market fit. A lot of our founders talk about market fit and working to identify that need in the marketplace and how to reach customers. How'd you guys do that in the early days?
Well, one answer is we didn't have it. Nobody does when they first launch a product, but even though we ended up selling 10,000 units in 18 months or so. We were really aggressively and assertively punching this product into the market to get there, which is exactly what you should do, by the way, and it worked, and it obviously all worked out. But we ran into a problem too, and the problem was that the customer that we really wanted wasn't just a consumer seeing us online and buying one brush. We wanted to get every human being, this is still true, a connected toothbrush, a connected high quality powered electric toothbrush. Even today in the US, very much a first world country, obviously, only 20 or 25% of the population uses an electric toothbrush. And so there's still actually a lot of folks using manual toothbrushes, which are great. I mean, they do the job for sure, but electric toothbrushes are better at cleaning the teeth. And so even in the United States, there's still an opportunity to get more people with high quality toothbrushes. And the connectivity, of course, we thought had a ton of residual value to insurance companies and their data sets and underwriting models, as well as to these gamification and rewards models, like I just described earlier. And so we wanted to get hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of these products out here. And so it was actually frustrating when somebody would, we do all this work and spend all this marketing money, and then somebody would see us online and buy one, right? And so on one hand, it's like, that's where it starts, right? It's one, then two, then four, then eight, then
Yeah.
16, so on, right? And so that is the game. But what I think we wanted to figure out how to do was to get distribution secured through large dental insurance businesses. So we very eagerly went out to the market. We met all these leading executives from these large insurance businesses and pitched them what we thought was a really exciting brand new opportunity to innovate. And what we heard in response was, hey, even if we wanted to innovate, we actually don't really even have the digital infrastructure to plug your product into the system. So these guys weren't that motivated to innovate. And even if they were, they couldn't deal with our mobile infrastructure and our manufacturing chassis. And I mean, this was like totally foreign language to a dental insurance executive that's been in the game for 35 years. And so we really didn't have a pathway forward. And that's really where Beam's big pivot came into play. We realized that the company was going to run out of money, and we were going to have all of these, this dream of connected toothbrushes was going to die, and the data and the big vision, it was going to die unless we just built a superior dental insurance business ourselves and use the brush and the wellness program that it's coupled with to show employers one by one a better way forward for their entire dental program, not just the hardware itself. And so we then went back to school, figuratively, and gave ourselves a PhD in dental insurance, something we had no background in previously. And now today, Beam is much more insurance company than even hardware manufacturer. Wow. And my co-founders and I have transformed our knowledge base from electrical and mechanical engineers doing custom electronics design and writing firmware in my living room to bona fide insurance experts. And that transformation is proof that if you are focused, if you have a big vision, a true north for your business, a vision that you have to see through to fruition, you'll learn anything, you'll do anything, you'll figure out anything, because it's all about solving the problem.
Sure. No, that's and so true. Oftentimes that initial idea is really just the beginning of something even grander. So that's so fun and so inspiring to hear that. So, and I think you'll agree, there's so much opportunity in the sort of the healthcare space. In fact, mHUB is launching a medtech accelerator. What's happening in your industry? What are people talking about? What's that next thing in your industry that you think?
Yeah, when we started Beam in 2012, as I described, we were really excited about the intersection of health and technology, and a lot of other people were too. Part of the reason why we refined our thesis into dental is because there was so much activity happening in health and technology and nothing happening in dentistry. We thought that was also like a really strategic place where we could, kind of outperform and bring innovation into that corner of healthcare, which is ostensibly a really sleepy corner of healthcare at that. But even just a few years ago, there wasn't even a name really to capture this digital infrastructure that was being built into healthcare. Today, we call this digital health, and it's a huge segment and probably one of the most aggressively growing segments of the venture capital world, of the economy in many ways. And there have been all these digital health IPOs in the past few years, like Zapongo and all these telemedicine businesses out there that really got a lot of shine during COVID because of their ability to help solve problems for healthcare infrastructure when everyone's been virtual. There's a lot happening in primary care as well, which we think is really interesting, which are, instead of waiting for a doctor to see you 3 months from now because they're just overwhelmed with patients, there are now models like One Medical where you can actually go book an appointment same day and access a more digitally friendly and digitally native in-person experience for your primary care. There's so much happening in digital health now. And we think it's still extremely early. And my evidence for this is pretty simple. Every time I go to the doctor or interact with the healthcare system, it's still pretty old school. There's still a lot of problems. There's still not much of an experience. There clearly still hasn't yet been that that iPhone moment,
Sure.
right? And we remember when the iPhone came out, it was like there was tech before the iPhone, and then there's everything after, and its influence on design and performance and really the economy and all the other companies that have been built on top of smartphone infrastructure and mobile infrastructure is obvious now, but you could sense it when it was happening. There was an iPhone moment, and healthcare hasn't really had that yet. And so there's plenty of opportunity, is I think what I'm getting at. If I'm an entrepreneur right now, even if this was like the first company and I'm still back in the living room looking for like the big idea, like how do we build a product? What domain space should we be thinking about? I would still answer that the same way as I did 10 years ago when we were actually doing this, which is there is so much opportunity inside digital health and healthcare to deploy hardware skill sets, scientific skill sets in the biotech and genetic engineering space. There's a huge role for just core software and kind of creating the SaaS platforms for healthcare. And then even if you're a lawyer, legal and compliance infrastructure in healthcare needs a critical overhaul. Like you can kind of click into like any skill set possible, and there's an application into healthcare, and it matters. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market. It's intimate. It's critically important. Everybody has a healthcare, story of a family member, they themselves, and very much literally life and death as well. So I can't think of a better domain space where like the problems are worth solving and they're hard problems and pretty much anybody can get involved.
Yeah. So let's talk about leadership. So, I know as CEO of my agency, I learn something new every day. I have the blind spots, and I try to, recognize them. I guess the sign of a good leader is recognizing that he or she has blind spots. So talk about, you as a co-founder, CEO, early days, the blind spots, and what are some of your biggest learnings?
Well, as you know from doing this yourself, the learnings never stop.
No.
They start on day one, right? There's
Yeah.
no ramp. There's no ramp into, it's very easy to become CEO. Start a company, file for an LLC, and name yourself the CEO. There you go. Right. So becoming the CEO is very simple. Becoming a leader and a CEO proper is a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about leadership, I really do think of it as leadership as a construct. And the reason why is because everybody can be a leader. You don't need the title. And we tell this to our team all the time. We have close to 300 people, and too often people look for their boss to tell them what to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they want their boss's boss, or they look to the CEO of the business for direction and guidance and kind of the answers to the test in a way. And my view has always been I want to build teams that empower people to do their very best work all the time. And part of doing your very best work and part of empowerment is around accountability.
Sure.
And accountability simply means that you get to make the decisions as often as possible. I want you actually to make as many of your own decisions as possible to distribute the fact that I can't be in every room anyway. And
Sure.
you probably don't want me in every room because there's a lot of stuff I don't know. And if you're a marketing expert, for example, I want you to make the decisions about what we should do in marketing, not me.
Sure.
But you just simply have to be, and this is the hard part, accountable to those outcomes if that's if you're making the decisions. That also applies to me as a leader as well. And I think one of the many things that I've learned in scaling a business is that the willingness to plant a flag and pick a direction and go is a pretty rare skill set. I didn't appreciate this much. And I was around a lot of other founders and entrepreneurs who are kind of naturally those types of people, right? we are going to go here. We are going to build this product. We're going to achieve this thing. We're going to solve this problem. And I'm not going to stop until I get there. That's what it's about. But that's actually a pretty rare skill. And getting other people to be motivated to get behind you, that's great leadership. And teaching them how to plant their own flags and set their own direction and help achieve that mission is also a very worthy and important part of leadership. I woke up a few years ago, very much in the process of building Beam, and realized that the company was still too dependent on me and my co-founders and our collective knowledge about the market that we're in and our collective decision-making ability and authority. And that if we really wanted to build a company that was going to scale and stand the test of time, we needed to build a company. And a company is not what Michon thinks. A company is what the collective orb of the business can accomplish, and the coordination of all those people and parts. And a lot of these principles, you can get in you can go spend $30 and buy a book and on leadership or whatever, and people will tell you all these things, these axioms of these truths of business, and they are very helpful, by the way, to just be reminded of them. But no one's broken new ground on this stuff in a long time. You have to experience it, especially when you're building something from scratch, and you have to feel. And so, I think one of the best pieces of advice I've taken from myself is feel everything. You need to feel what it's like to get it totally wrong, and make a bet the company decision and be wrong. Right? You need to feel what it's like to hire the wrong person to do the thing and to trust them completely, and then they blow it and have to fire them. And just and you have to own it because you were the person that found them and hired them and powered them in the first place. Right?
Yeah.
And there's a million other versions of this on the good side as well. Obviously, there's way more goods than bads in business. Help with hiring people and seeing them grow and develop and surprise you with the things they do and build and experience. These are amazing things that happen as well. But you have to feel all of it, because you can read it in the book. And I know a lot of people that read a lot of business books and then they feel like they're good at business. And it's like, how much of it have you actually done? How many of these decisions have you actually owned?
Yeah.
And then it becomes a different answer. And then one other thing I think I really learned early on was, because I have some phenomenal investors and partners around me, was how to manage my ego. I thought, I was in my early 20s when I started Beam, and a lot of people will, slap you on the back and compliment you and tell you how smart and awesome and amazing you are. And you can, you believe the headlines after a while.
Yeah.
And I was in that camp, and even though it was true and we had accomplished a lot and there was a lot of good stuff happening, there were also some terrible things happening. We had a couple of run out of money, we're going back to my living room moments at Beam. We for sure did. And at one point I had, from one of my early board members and investors, he really brought a come to Jesus moment for me to the table that really changed my leadership style, frankly, overnight. Because what he illuminated for me, it was a little bit less dramatic than like the what's it called when somebody's having like a substance abuse problem and they get confronted by their friends and stuff.
Intervention. Like an
intervention. It was a little bit less dramatic than an intervention, but it was directionally similar to an intervention. And the essence behind the message was, if you keep running your company this way, you're going to lose it. And you're going to lose it because you think you've already won. You think you've already finished the thing. And in reality, you haven't even really started the thing, even though it's been years and you've been every day for 80-hour weeks. So which frustrates you, right? Because you think you're checking all the boxes and you're doing the right stuff and you're willing to work as hard as it takes. You work yourself to exhaustion every day to figure this thing out. But you're going to lose the company because you think you're already there. You think it's all, if you just work hard, you win. You think it's just inevitable that you're going to get through to the other side. And you have to start thinking totally differently, coming to the table hat in hand and actually learn a thing or two from people that have done it before, from people that are trying to help you and advise you, from the people that you need to have around you that can take the company to the next level.
Sure.
And if you do that, I absolutely believe all the things that you currently think are inevitable will actually happen. You will be successful, things will happen, etc. And I really took it to heart. I was a team sports guy growing up. I played football and baseball. And, I remember those tough love sessions with my coaches, because there's a balance between, having the confidence that you're going to go hit a home run, even if you just struck out at your last at bat, right?
Yeah.
Like that's an important part of the psychology of being a good athlete. But if that ego goes one click too far, it becomes toxic. It actually pushes away your teammates, and you're arrogant. You've become obsessed with your own success and not your team's success, and you're doing things for yourself instead of for your team. And that balance, which I've been managing actively ever since, really shocked me awake, and it helped me overnight become a different leader and a better leader. And now I try to be that sounding board for other entrepreneurs that I think can benefit from, frankly, from time to time, like I did, a little tough love.
Yeah, I agree. So before we wrap up, I'm sure I get some hate email if I don't ask this question. So talk about the first round of funding. Talk about how you did it. How'd you get that done? Because that's usually the major barrier for some entrepreneurs of realizing their dream. So talk about your first round of fundraising and what that was like.
If you heard that glass shatter in the background, that was a good allegory for how fundraising was for me for the longest time. Fundraising's hard. It's always been hard. I think it's kind of meant to be hard in a way. And still today, Beam's, we just raised an $80 million round that we finished at the beginning of this year, and it was just as hard as it was the first time. And I think we've raised like 7 institutional rounds of capital or something like that now, and it's still really, really hard. And it's high stress, and there's a lot on the line from a performance perspective. These are moments where it's like, if the check gets cut, there's a business. The check doesn't get cut, I don't think there's a business anymore. It's over, right? And so another thing that you have to feel it. You have to do it to really understand. I'm actually with some investors right now, and we'll be throughout the weekend. And they're on the investing side of the thing, and so their take is like, oh yeah, and then this company raised money, and then now they're awesome. And it's like, man, do you realize what they had to do to get the money? Like, this is just, it's a total imbalance in perspective and process along the way.
Can you talk about it a little bit? So can you talk about it a little bit? Let's drill down just a little bit more of, so what should these guys be thinking about? Like, if they're thinking of raising their first round of money, is it, obviously having a super tight presentation? Do you have to have a working prototype? Can you talk about what are the investors looking for? I guess I think the folks tuning in will probably want to know, like, what are they looking for? And I know there are different businesses and different screens that, as far as valuation, but can you talk about that a little bit, just in general terms?
Totally. Generally speaking, there are 3 main factors that an investor is going to be looking for in the early stages of the business. There's team, there's market, and there's product. And having a great team and assembling a great team of folks that are built into that represent the skills needed to really run a successful business is great. And so it's like a great way to just audit yourself. If you're missing a piece, you might need a co-founder or a second co-founder in order to fill out, well, who's on the sales and business development end of this thing, who's on the technicals end of this thing, et cetera. And the quality of the team will matter a lot to how the story is told, and therefore an investor's interest in being a part of that story and helping make it come true, that vision. The market is increasingly important for investors. And the reason why is because they know that in domain spaces that are really important and big the shots on goal of investing in companies that are trying to figure out those problems is a really important catalyst to the eventual value that the business will create. Put simply, if you're in a huge market like healthcare and you're attacking a valuable component of it, an investor knows that if it works and you build let's say a 9 out of 10 business, that 9 out of 10 in a huge market is probably worth multiple billions of dollars, which is more than enough for what an investor needs to see to get excited about investing in the business now. In a different market, maybe one that's not growing as much, or maybe it's small, maybe it's even a shrinking market, even building a 9 out of 10 business in that market isn't going to create that much value. So a lazy example here is like a restaurant. You could build the world's most amazing restaurant and it'll probably generate a lot of returns for you if you own it, but an investor might not see that exciting of a return on the scale of venture capital returns, where $1 million today could turn into $1 billion in the future. And so that's team and that's market, and then product is probably the one that's the most obvious to people. It is what you're building, or it is what you've built. It's what your prototypes are about. It's the thing that actually solves the problem. And I think the biggest insight, which is a really simple one that I hear all the time from investors, is the demo. Investors love getting their hands on the thing. If it's a physical product, they love experiencing the thing, even if it's virtual or purely a digital product. And that makes the experience come alive for them in a way that goes way beyond just the slide deck, right? The slides say, and don't worry, our product is awesome. It does these 3 things, bullet, bullet, bullet. Well, great, but can you show me? And anytime you get up to the whiteboard and you actually show somebody how something works, it creates much more of a connection to the thing. That's the hiring signal for me. Whenever I was hiring people in person, if somebody during the interview process said, let me show you, let me draw this thing out for you, that was like, I'd hire that person every time, because I love that thinking process where it's not like, how can I say a good answer that gets my hiring manager excited and wants to hire me? It's like, let me just draw some stuff. Let's nerd out on this thing for 30 minutes. And with investors, they love the rotation to the let me just show you a demo, because that'll really help you understand and feel what I'm building here. Mix those factors in a cauldron: an exciting market, a really cool demoable product experience, and a great team, and throw a bunch of authenticity and passion on top of it. And you cannot underrate those characteristics, because the last thing anybody wants to do is partner with somebody that they don't like personally. People do business with people they like. That is true.
Yep.
And they also do business with people who they know really, really do care about whatever the thing is. Like, this isn't a business. We're not in business to make money. We're in business. I mean, that is a result of it. But if that's all it is, that'll come through in your lack of passion, right? When we were hovering over the bathtub to make our electronics work for the first connected toothbrush, we weren't there because we're like, oh, this will be worth a lot of money. We were there because we wanted to build the thing, and we were so excited about it. And that came through to anybody who was willing to listen, because we would tell anybody who was willing to listen. And that really does make an impression on not just investors, but really anybody that you need to be on your team. Manufacturing partners, biz dev relationships, early sales, and certainly fundraising, which is a sales process in and of itself. It really comes through if you're authentic and passionate about your subject matter.
That's fantastic. And that's a great way to end it. I think we're going to take some questions from the audience, but Fro, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I hope our audience, you guys got some good advice that you can apply to your business right away. Kim, are we going to take some questions from the audience?
Hi, nice to join you again. I'll go ahead and queue up the questions for you, Fro.
Okay.
So we have a question about the early days, in the early days of prototyping on the toothbrush, how you found your test groups, what techniques you use to actually get people willing to try the product.
Yeah, that's a good one. So we actually did two things in the very early days. One was the free version, and the other was the it costs money version. So the first thing we did was we went to like a street fair that was actually right outside of our first office, and we literally signed people up by hand. Had a spreadsheet and a little booth at the thing, and we pulled people aside. This is where passion and authenticity really worked, because we were talking about, people are like eating cotton candy and, listening to live music. And then we were trying to get them to pay attention to something about a toothbrush. Getting people to pay attention was in and of itself a challenge, but we were able to sign up early, like working groups and like user test groups. The old fashioned way, go startup weekend style, just go knock on doors and tap people on shoulders and get them excited one by one. Later on, we did spend a little money and we worked with like a marketing consultancy that one of their services was to help assemble some like market segmented user groups, and people would get paid with gift cards or whatever to join a cohort of 35-year-old women or 20-something men or whatever, and then we could test actually how the brush would be received and used differently by those different user sets. And that actually did reveal some interesting insights that we still leverage today as a business about the family friendliness and the kind of social aspect of brushing your teeth, since everybody does it in a family and parents are constantly trying to get their kids to build and maintain better habits. The rewards ecosystem that we have built around brushing your teeth from a social perspective was an insight generated back in the day by some of those more formalized user groups that we did.
So yes, that kind of brought up another question that we had, just in terms of the price point for the brush. And I hope I'm understanding this question correctly, in the policies. And once industry was engaged, and was there talk about subsidizing the pricing in any way to users? How did that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's essentially our business model today. So how we wanted it to work back when we were trying to partner with insurance companies is we wanted them to subsidize the cost of the brush and just give brushes to every member. And that was one of the areas of friction with legacy insurance companies who just saw that as a product line that would eat into their profits. So they said no way. Now, depending on the industry and the margin structure of different industries, that still could actually play out valuably depending on what someone might be building and the domain space that they're in. But for us, it didn't work at all. That's what we wanted to be true. That's not actually how it played out. But that is how it plays out today at Beam. Since we built our own insurance company, that's exactly what we do. We give the brushes, we subsidize the cost, it's free to the user. It's a voluntary program, so any one of our insurance members that wants the brush, we just ship it right to them. Because we know that their engagement with that experience and the brand loyalty that it generates is worth the cost of the brush 10 times over a long period of time. Because if they stay with us long enough as an insurance member, the profit generated from our insurance business much more than exceeds the cost of the brush itself. So there's some really clever models of charging reoccurring like monthly fees or service charges, et cetera, where the hardware can be subsidized deeply or even free. In the consumer packaged goods space, this would be called like a razor blade model, where you make all the margin and the money on the razor blades, but the razor is pretty cheap. It's meant to be sold essentially at cost. PlayStations and gaming systems work like this too. An Xbox is sold for just about what it costs to produce, and all the money's made on the residual and ancillary products that surround it.
Hey, Fro, I have a question for you here. Can you describe building the software component of the Beam brush? How did that evolve with the hardware?
Oh man, well, since we were a very hardware-centric team, the first versions of the software were done outsourced. So we partnered with 1099 contractor software developers that kind of built the first version of the app. We got the Bluetooth to hook up between the brush and the app and build an initial user interface. So it was very hacked together, similar to the first version of the hardware. It was all bare bones, pretty clunky. It did only the bare minimum set of features. But similar to like how Tesla thinks about this, you make a car, in their case, that's sexy and cool and very desirable. But that thing is packed full of sensors and basically unused pieces of hardware that one day, as the software evolves, might become a feature on the car. And then they ship an over-the-air update from Tesla HQ to all their cars in their fleet, which then turns on a new feature leveraging a piece of computing power inside the Tesla that might have been dormant the entire time. And so we've thought about this new generation of hardware that we're getting ready to release in this way, which is that we've packed it full of tons of whiz bang levers that not all of which are going to be active in the brush when it first launches. And then the user testing, and as we get feedback and as we learn more, we can actually ship via the software, which is evolving much more rapidly than the hardware. We can ship those new features to the brush whenever we want. So since software is able to move very quickly and hardware takes a long time to introduce to market, we decided to purposely overbuild the hardware now that we're on the third generation of the hardware, so that we can preserve optionality in the future. This might be a technique that certain earlier stage companies can use if they can afford it, but packing your hardware full of more sensors, et cetera, is going to add to the cost of the product and might not actually scale for your first generation prototypes.
Sure. And speaking of gamification, there's another question here that I think is pretty interesting. The question is there a percentage difference in dental insurance cost between someone who uses the connected Beam brush versus someone who doesn't?
Yeah, so one of the components of the program, it's kind of a positive double whammy for the user. If they want the brush, they get it for free as part of being an insurance member. And then if they use it, they can get a discount on their premium. So you should be able to make money or save money in both ways there, where you don't have to go buy a Sonic Care if you're a Beam member, because you can get one sent to you by us essentially, and you can actually also save money on the insurance coverage itself. So we get leverage in multiple places out of the business model.
That's awesome. And I think that may be all the questions, Kim. Are there any others in here?
Yeah, there are a couple more that came in. One was about, you talked about, when you pivoted from launching a dental insurance company from the brush. You talked about kind of the self-education. Was there a need to hire other experts, like in terms of like hiring your team? What did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely is the answer. We gave ourselves the PhD in insurance, but that takes time. And there's still plenty of blind spots. A good example in insurance is an actuary. That's a very specialized skill set that's germane to insurance. And no version of our PhD was going to include the deep actuarial science domain expertise that we needed. So we went and found a phenomenal actuary with experience in dental insurance and brought them onto the team. Provided that you have the capital, there's always a game-changing piece of specialized talent that you would love to have in your company. And I would encourage people to think critically about what that is at any given time. And if you can afford it, go get it, because you can probably surround the non-super specialized skills with effort, right? Like if you just need some marketing help, but it doesn't need to be incredibly specialized, use a third-party partner and put them on contract. Use just kind of like a MBA right out of school, or somebody who just graduated with interest in marketing, or just do it yourself. And so just at a high level, knowing the difference between the places where you need specialized talent and saving your money to spend there versus getting a bunch of people who are kind of jack of all trades, smart and high effort, that can kind of fill in the rest of the gaps that aren't as specialized, is a really good thing to understand based based on whatever your business model is.
Well, great. Now I do believe we're at time. That brings us to 6:30 exactly. Such a great conversation. So much good advice that was shared for mHUB members and just entrepreneurs in general, particularly in the hardware space. So thank you so much. I'm sorry to anyone who's questioned that we weren't able to get to. There were a couple other ones as well. Michon and Alex, thanks so much.
No problem. A lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is great. We're huge fans of the mHUB at Beam, and we're really excited to be able to spend some time together with everybody tonight. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, we appreciate you and everyone who joined us this evening for being here. We do an mHUB Industry Disruptors events on a quarterly basis, so you can follow our events page to stay tuned for the next one. Have a good evening,
Kim.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
See you, Michon. Later, guys.
Bro. Take care.